This is CNN Breaking News.
We have breaking news, and it is sad news to report today. Comedian Jerry Lewis is dead at the age of 91. You'll remember he was best known for his iconic movie roles like The Nutty Professor and for all the signature slapstick characters during his run with Dean Martin. He was also, though, and this is important to remember, a humanitarian, hosting the annual Muscular Dystrophy Telethon for many years, a true legend that will certainly be remembered.
He was born Joseph Levitch in 1926, but he became known to the world as Jerry Lewis, the zany but lovable fool in films such as The Bellboy and The Nutty Professor. Lewis hit it big at age 20 when he teamed up with another young entertainer, Dean Martin.
Dean was the virile macho, and I was the monkey, and I knew we had lightning in a barrel.
Martin and Lewis became one of the most popular comedy teams in history. Thousands of sold-out performances, 16 hit movies, and dozens of radio and TV appearances. On his own, Lewis signed a 7-year, $10 million contract with Paramount in 1959. At that time, it was the largest contract ever between a studio and performer. Lewis went on to act in or direct shows and movies for several decades. He later offered this advice to fellow entertainers.
Be a hit. Score. Get the audience laughing and happy. That's the secret of success in this business.
He didn't just make audiences laugh. Lewis used his fame to make a difference, taking up the fight against muscular dystrophy. For more than 4 decades, his annual Labor Day telethons helped raise more than $1 billion for research and treatment, and almost always ended with his signature song, "You'll Never Walk Alone."
Walk on with hope in your heart, and you'll never walk alone.
Lewis struggled with his own health problems over the years, including prostate cancer, type 1 diabetes, pulmonary fibrosis, and heart disease.
It's been a long, grueling ride. I've ingested more than 24,000 pills.
But through it all, he kept his sense of humor.
You better laugh at it, because the alternative is not funny.
Indeed, sad news, not just for the entertainment industry, for the country. A legend I think many of us grew up with. We were learning today that Jerry Lewis died peacefully at his home. He was surrounded by family. He had 7 children through his life. And of course, a legend on the stage, on the screen, and in humanitarian causes as well. Joining me now on the phone is comedian Penn Jillette. He tweeted this picture out right when the news broke. That's him there with the legend. Penn, thanks so much for taking the time to join us today. I just want to ask you yourself, someone who's an entertainer, a comedian, what do you remember most about Jerry Lewis?
Well, you know, you always have to say, no matter how much you want to talk about what a humanitarian he was and how long his career was in show business, you've got to lead with the word funny. I mean, I didn't get to spend as much time with Jerry as I wanted to, and he was always very emotional when he was that much of a hero and a legend. But I remember flying with him, you know, on the airplane, flying into Vegas, I think from LA, just a little flight, and every single person that was anywhere near him was just laughing hysterically. You know, he had glasses in his mouth and putting his seatbelt on wrong and doing physical comedy and just yelling and just crazy and full of life. And this was when he was, you know, in his 80s and just making the whole airplane happy. I mean, that little clip you had of him saying, make people happy, make people laugh. There's this sense where a comedian being on all the time is supposed to be a negative thing, and I guess it can be. But with Jerry, he was on all the time, and that made life worth living.
And you mentioned it there, that with Jerry Lewis, it was the timing, it was the voices, the characters, but he was always such a physical comment, the falling, just the facial expressions, really unforgettable.
Yeah, he just was completely funny all the time in this kind of very, very pure way. I mean, it's just I'm just going to say it over and over again. He was just deeply funny every second. I mean, when I first met him, I kind of tried to be cool and tried to be kind of above it. You know, he's the old school and we're the new school, you know, way back then. And you just couldn't do it. I just fell to pieces my whole childhood. I mean, everything I considered to be funny was built by Jerry. And because I've been part of a comedy team for 42 years, Martin and Lewis, you know, Teller and I studied everything about them, watched every single appearance we could see, listened to everything, watched all the movies. I mean, comedy teams are an important part of America, and they were the biggest there ever was. I mean, they are the biggest, most important team, and it only lasted 10 years. It was 10 years that changed everybody.
I was going to ask you that, particularly you as someone who's made his name as part of a comedy team, a partnership. What you learned from Jerry Lewis, certainly from that famous partnership with Dean Martin, what you learned from their partnership, but also what yourself and fellow comics learned from him. What were his innovations?
Well, you know, you could really, you don't even have to get abstract about this. He invented techniques. He invented the video tap that allows people who are in movies to direct them. I mean, he is the one that allowed us to watch playback in film. I mean, he invented that. There's a lot of just ways that comedy movies are made that were entirely invented by Jerry Lewis. I mean, you go to the bellboy and the errand boy and the caddy. Well, caddy he didn't direct, but once he starts directing himself, all your kind of comedy director performers, you know, all come directly from Jerry Lewis. And also the way he used the frame. I mean, there's a scene, and forgive me if I'm wrong, I think it's the bellboy where he's in an elevator, and it's just this close-up of the man with a toothpick and Jerry. And it's just using the frame of the movie for comedy in ways that had not been done before. I mean, he understood the close-up. He also understood breaking the fourth wall. There's a thing he does where he, at the end of one of his movies, goes over a balcony and then shows that it's fake. He showed behind the scenes. It was just very, very innovative, really smart, and constantly funny.
You know, we've been showing some of these clips, even ones you referred to here, as you've been speaking, and you see him there. I mean, it is the physical comedy. Didn't have to utter a word to make you laugh, which is just an enormous talent in the field. Yes. I wanted to ask you just for our viewers at home who wouldn't know what a video tap is, explain how that worked, that he allowed it so that he and others who followed him could direct themselves, in effect, in comedy movies.
Well, I'm sorry I didn't explain that better. What happens is in film, we're so used to this with video that we just assume that you can see everything right back. When film had to be processed, you didn't get to see it till the dailies. So someone who was on the set performing and couldn't look through the camera, couldn't see it, would have no idea how the take was, and therefore couldn't really direct efficiently. I mean, it's not the way Charlie Chaplin directed. He had to decide what the cameraman said was funny. And Jerry found a way to, I don't know the technology exactly, but to shoot video through the eyepiece of the camera, as I understand it, so that he could then see a video representation of what had gone on the film afterwards and seen if he was okay with that take. Now, now that we're doing most of recording on video, they seem less important. But for 20 years, 30 years, that was the way everybody who had to be on camera and direct did it. And it was invented by Jerry Lewis. He has the patent on it, I believe. That's incredible. I would have had no idea. I'm sure a lot of folks watching right now who knew and loved his work wouldn't have known that either. Before I let you go, I just want to ask you to place Jerry Lewis in the pantheon of great comedians, from George Burns to Robin Williams through Eddie Murphy today, you and through Penn and Teller. Where do you place him in that pantheon of great American comic actors and directors? I think I want to go a step further. I mean, people don't really remember this, but when Martin and Lewis were at their peak in the 50s, they were bigger than the Beatles. They were bigger than Sinatra. They were bigger than Bing Crosby. They were bigger than any star has ever been in the history of the United States of America. When they were in Times Square in a hotel room, it stopped traffic in New York. It was a much bigger deal than the Beatles. And, we have short memories once in a while, but Martin and Lewis really did change the world. And I think in a time when we're very focused on individuals, it's important to remember that teams were important. And I think that Jerry Lewis, one of the giants, and even though the movie may have meant this a little bit ironically in the title, he was the king of comedy. I don't think you can think of somebody in the 20th century or 21st century who's more important in comedy than Jerry. But also teams are really important. And Martin and Lewis, we still had that connection with them as well as we had Jerry. And now with both Dean and Jerry gone, we don't have an American comedy team that's that big and that important.
The king of comedy, bigger than the Beatles. Penn Jillette, thanks so much for your thoughts. It's been a real pleasure hearing your view of the man and the legend. And the breaking news, the legendary, truly legendary Jerry Lewis, dead at the age of 91. We're going to talk to his publicist, who knew him very well, right after this short break. And our breaking news, Jerry Lewis dead today at the age of 91. A true comic legend for decades, but also a humanitarian known for those annual telethons for victims of muscular dystrophy. He did a lot of great work during his time. So sorry to see and report his passing today on CNN. Joining us now on the phone is Candy Kazo. She's the publicist for the late Jerry Lewis. Candy, thanks so much for joining us today. I wonder if you could just tell us about his final days and weeks. We understand that he was surrounded by family as he passed today.
Yes, that's correct. He passed away peacefully at his home in Las Vegas earlier today with his family by his side.
Now, had he been ill in recent weeks? Was the family preparing themselves for this?
Well, he had been slightly ill and spent some time in a local hospital, but came home and was planning on making some on-stage live appearances in the future. So things turn rather quickly, unfortunately, and at the age of 91 as well.
It happens, it does. Goodness. So he was still planning live performances. That seems very much in fitting with his character and his career.
Most definitely, yeah. He was not a quitter. He had plans to go back to New York to do a stage appearance, and also had plans in Las Vegas as well, returning to the stage in January of 2018.
Planning that far ahead. Candy, I wonder if you could help folks at home understand and I know this goes back, he did his first Muscular Dystrophy Association fundraiser back in 1966, so a good 50 years of history there. Can you explain what led him down that path?
I really can't, because that was something that he kept very much to himself. I know he was asked many, many times why he became involved with the Muscular Dystrophy Telethon, and he was very hush-hush. He wouldn't even talk to me about that. So I actually stopped asking, but it was such a passion for him. Most people would only see him for that 24-hour period, but it was a full-time job for Mr. Lewis. The prep to put that telethon together was 3-4 months. Plus, he also traveled the world during that year period, visiting all his children, whether they lay in hospital beds or in their homes or in the actual hospitals. He was always there for his kids. And often I would be in his office, and we'd be talking about just general everyday activities, and tears would start to roll down his face. And I'd say, did I say something wrong? What's going on? He goes, no, I was just thinking about one of my kids. So he had such compassion for these children, but unfortunately the audience, the public, never saw that. They only saw that for a 24-hour period, but he lived with that every day, every year since 1966 until 2009.
It's funny you say Jerry's kids there. Of course, Jerry Lewis did have 7 children of his own, but I remember that phrase, as a kid growing up. We knew the beneficiaries of his fundraising, victims of muscular dystrophy, as Jerry's kids. That was a phrase in America, and it's interesting as you describe him. Clearly, his emotional tie to them was very strong.
Exactly, very, very strong. And very few people also realize that over the course of all those years, $2.45 billion has been raised. And so Labor Day is not the same. Without Jerry Lewis, Labor Day just comes and goes. There's no significance of Labor Day weekend.
$2.5 billion raised for those kids, and as you said, a lot of personal time spent with Jerry Lewis, the man himself. Candy Kazzo, thanks so much for joining us and giving us a better sense of him.
All right, thank you.
Please stay with us. We'll be back with more.